The prophet Micah reads, chapter 6, verse 8. Let a man tell you what is good, and what does Yahweh demand from you? Only to do judgment and loving kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Of course, this would seem obvious to most, but unfortunately, when we look at the way that people behave, we often fall very far from this ideal. Not only is judgment and loving kindness hard to come by, but modesty seems to be something that has been all but forgotten from society. When we look at the fashion in the world and the way that people are encouraged to behave and encouraged to broadcast their intimate lives, be it in the personal space of their marriage, even to broadcast their naked bodies, sexual exploitation, pornography, and even just the plain modeling industry, where more and more it is becoming normal for women to post themselves practically nude in public environments, which of course seeps into the culture and affects how girls and women dress on a day-to-day basis. And any time that they get a chance to walk around without any clothes on, even if it's just a little covering of their private areas, but mostly naked, that's somehow considered to be standard dress, and no one is flagged for indecent exposure. Now, this just means that the sensitivity has been completely lost from people. In the name of freedom and sexual expression, people are now willing to completely compromise the privacy of their own soul and the integrity of their body. It is not liberating to walk around naked in the streets. It is not freeing to exploit your sexuality and pretend that you belong to the streets and that everyone is there to look at your intimate spaces and to see the parts of your body that should be covered when you're out in public. This is not to say that you should be ashamed of your body. In fact, in the privacy of your own relationships, you should be as free as humanly possible, as God made Adam and Eve in the garden, naked and unashamed. But when it comes to engaging with society and going out into the world, people need to have the correct boundaries when it comes to dress and when it comes to exposing their bodies. Obviously, modesty applies to men as well, and for the sake of vanity, men will walk around without clothes as well, and this is completely wrong, of course. Modesty is also in behavior. Even if someone were to theoretically have their skin covered, they could be acting highly immodestly, and that would also be a huge mistake. But what it comes down to is the fact that, in truth, men and women belong in committed relationships, and we should not have people walking around flaunting their sexuality in the streets. Rather, it is something that is private and something that is sacred and holy and is confined for a space where you can express that in an atmosphere of purity and holiness, not in one of vanity and promiscuity and a complete lack of appreciation for the importance of yourself as a human being. Because a woman who is married and belongs with her husband, if she's going to be out in the streets letting the whole world see her naked body, that diminishes her value to a ridiculous degree. Instead of being loved and desired by her husband, being sanctified to her man and no one else, she is now the property of the world to gaze at her naked body as she claims that this somehow empowers her. It's the furthest thing from empowerment. It's destructive and completely erodes the value that a woman can contribute in her marriage. There is a Jewish tradition for married women to cover their hair, because not only should all women have their bodies covered, but a young single woman who needs to attract a mate definitely needs to look additionally attractive. And so for her to walk around with her hair uncovered makes sense. But once that a woman is married and she's now purely separated and sanctified to her husband, why in the world does she need to be out there attracting the attention of other men? It can only be for the bad. And so we find in the book of Numbers, when a woman is suspected of cheating on her husband and sleeping with another man, she is then brought to the temple where she must make an offering to determine whether or not she did, in fact, cheat on her husband. And what it says here, Numbers chapter 5, verse 18, and the priest shall stand the woman before Yahweh and expose her head. And so we see that this is actually a way of shaming her to show that she's really immodest. And even though that her head is covered, as it should be on a married woman, but she's clearly entered a realm of immodesty and infidelity where she's now suspected of cheating on her own husband, which is adultery, one of the 10 commandments, and is punishable by death. Sometimes modernity is good. Sometimes progress is necessary and change needs to take place. But this absurd Western idea that it is good for women to completely get rid of all standards of modesty to the point where they walk around naked in the streets and post photos on the internet of them wearing little or no clothes whatsoever, even married women doing so. This is a travesty. This is the absolute breakdown of the family unit and the breakdown of the integrity of the female spirit. And of course, men walking around all day looking at women wearing barely any clothing does not do good for them either. And men absolutely need to double down on their standards that they have for their women, because this is not a sustainable path for a society. We're talking about people who have completely lost their sensitivity for nudity and the understanding of where it belongs and where is its proper place. So we need to see real correction in this area where people can understand that modesty is not something that limits you. It's something that's freeing. It's the acknowledgement that you don't owe your sexual exploitation to the masses out in the world. Rather, you're keeping it under wraps because your body is sacred and your sexuality is holy. And it's not something that belongs to the whole world. It's something that needs to be expressed in intimate environments, in love and connection and procreation, having children. This is the beauty of sex. This is the beauty of our physicality, not something that's done with thoughtlessness and a lack of care and consideration for the integrity of our souls.